You
5,
troll me.
4, 3.
Get ready. Look in your camera too.
All right, welcome to Grab a Crate. We're here with Sam Cutri. How
Hello.
you going, Sam?
Very well, thanks.
Sam is part of the WAM board and he also owns a studio called Loop Studios and he's one of the best lecturers at SAE.
Oh, best. Thank you.
The best.
Let's just briefly talk about WAM. So what's your role at WAM?
So, as a board member of WAM, I was sort of responsible with sort of the strategy of where WAM is going, how we're going to spend our money, the sort of shows that we're going to put on, what the vision for WAM was like. It's about consolidating and galvanizing the industry now. So we're doing WAMCon and WAM Fest, and you've probably done a few of those events, haven't you, in your time at SAE? Engineered at one of those?
I have. I have.
WAM
Yes,
Fest?
Yes.
Yeah?
Last try.
Yeah, so a lot of it was about, strategy. Where's it going? What's it going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years? How are we going to get our money to pay for everything? Where's the money going? How is it getting paid? And then, so the board makes those types of decisions together, and then we feed that information to the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, who's in charge of running the company, basically, right? And then he takes what we sort of put together and then passes it on to his staff to make that stuff happen.
Right.
On the ground. That's basically the function of a board, right? Or most big companies have got a board that kind of gives it the big picture detail on where they're going to go and how they're going to sort of operate over time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about, you own a studio.
Yeah.
What's your studio called?
It's called Loop Recording Studios.
And how long has that been going for?
It's been going for about 20 years.
So let's talk about the backstory. So how did you come up with the name?
Okay.
That sort of thing.
Okay, so I was in Byron Bay for a long time throughout the 90s, and while I was in Byron, we built a place called Rocking Horse Studios, which is one of the most popular, famous studios. Yothu Yindi was recording there at the time, and Gangajang and My Sex, and do you know any of these bands?
I'm probably too young to know these bands.
None of them.
I'm sorry, no.
None of them. Well, Sticky Fingers just finished recording their last album.
We know
there.
Sticky Fingers.
Everybody knows Sticky Fingers. They're one of my favourite bands at the moment as well. I just love what they do. They are recording there now. Anyway, back then we built that studio. We built Rocking Horse, and then we built Studio B there. We put a beautiful Neve console in there and bought all this most amazing gear. So I learned how to build a studio at the time I was signed with EMI Records in a band called ICU, where we recorded an album, made a few videos, and then our music was published, worldwide published, on Neighbours and E Street.
Oh, wow.
So you know Neighbours?
Yeah, TV show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, oh wow.
We'll talk about another
Do you
one.
remember E Street?
I've never heard of
E Street?
No.
You never heard of it?
I'm
Well,
sorry.
it was kind of like, there was a handful of shows like that at the time. Home and Away, Neighbours, E Street, and I think one or two others. Anyway, we got a publishing deal, worldwide publishing deal. Our music ended up all around the world.
Wow.
It was pretty cool. And I was signed with them for about 6 years. And then I'm like, right, some financial crash happened. I can't even remember which one it was. There's been so many of them. End of 90s or mid 90s, and then the record company went, right, you guys are shelved. We're just going to shelve you. We're happy to sell you your music and videos back, but it's going to cost you $250,000. What?
Jesus.
What? How did that happen? How did we even lose the rights to our music?
Right.
We didn't even know that was.
Was that
how did it even happen?
Part of the contract or something that you guys had signed?
I never
What?
saw that. Obviously, it was.
Yeah.
We did sign a contract. We signed a couple of contracts. One was with the record company that we were working with, and the other one was with EMI, the A&R manager from EMI, who used to come up every couple of weeks and, with a bottle of champagne and, make us feel like we were special and sit in there and just blow smoke up our ass the whole time going, oh, you guys are great, you sound awesome. And me and my mate are looking at each other going, but that was so out of tune. How could you think that's awesome? Can't you hear how bad that timing is of that player there? And he's going, wicked, mate, wicked. Anyway, yeah. So that sort of came to a grinding halt, and I thought, I'm going back. I'm coming home. I'm going to come home. I need to see my family. I need to spend some time at home. And almost immediately, soon as I got home, my cousin Don's going, I'm building a studio. Let's go. So we started, and brick by brick, by brick by brick, we built this place, you know, and it's now, it was then the biggest studio. ABC had just shut down their big studios in East Perth. And it became the biggest studio in Western Australia. So, you know, the symphony orchestra came, all the jazz bands were coming, lots of artists coming through. Every time a big act came through the town, they'd go there and rehearse. Like Nick Cave was just there a little while ago, sort of practicing with his band before his shows, and the list goes on, right? And that was pretty special. And we called it Loop because the name was available, and it's a wicked name.
It is. It's really catchy.
It is.
And it's like short and sweet.
Short and sweet, and it just works. And then 10 years after, it was taken over by a Christian group who were recording all of their, their religious bands, religious music, and all that sort of stuff. They did amazing for about 6 years, and about, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, that Rada took over the main room, right? And Rada, of course, you know, Matt and Dan. Matt works with us, Matt Geo works with us here, you know, a couple of amazing producers and engineers, and they're running the big room there. And Studio B came up recently. And Don and I have got, you know, this list of gear that's longer than your arm, basically, with microphones and pre's and so on and so on. We thought, right, it's time, let's do it. You know, Don's still the owner of the place, and I'm like, so right, I'm taking over that, and so now, you know,
so
Loop's back.
How many times a week would you say you spend in the studio roughly?
Well, that's an interesting story because, you know, I work here full time, and I've done my time in studios. You know, I have. You know, I'm just not that keen on spending 8-hour days in a studio anymore. So I kind of handpick my bands, that I work with, artists that I work with, and it's been going really well so far. You know, the bands that I've been working with have just done amazing things straight away. So I tend to track as quickly as possible because I don't want to be in there too long. But the only reason I can track as quickly as I do is because we do a month of pre-production before we get in there.
Yep.
Okay.
Like solid, right? You know, we're talking every day. I'll get sent the demos, I'll get sent the multi-tracks, and we'll try different arrangements and you know, different instrumentation throughout. You know, like for example, a song might be guitar, bass and drums all the way through, and I might go, well, why don't we just start it with guitars? And it's guitars for the first 30 seconds, and then everything comes in at the first chorus. And so we go through all of that before we hit the studio. I'm not interested in going into a studio without doing pre-production because it's just too hard. And I feel like I'm always not giving my clients the best value by going into a studio without pre-production. Do you know what I mean?
Do you also feel like it's a little bit like messy as well? Like you've got the band jumping in and they sometimes want to chop and change things last minute as well?
That's right, because stuff comes up and I can't help it, you know what I mean? I'll go, if I say this thing, then I'm about to say, we're going to lose 2 hours.
Yeah.
Straight away. Because the band's going to consider it, and we're in the studio, they're going to go, yay, nay, or yeah, 5 minutes talking, and then, well, can you just try it? Okay, we'll try it. Cool, that sounds all right. Do you want to just try recording it? You know, and there's 1 hour gone.
Yeah. Basically.
And, you know, we should have been finished the drums by now, but no, we're not going to finish the drums for another hour because we've just worked out this new bit. That some of the musicians are cool with and others not so much.
Yeah.
Because you know how musos are, right? You know, some of them are really open to change and others are really stuck with what they've got for one reason or another.
Yeah.
All good. But doing 2 months or a month of pre-production before going into a studio really helps that process. And that's why in 2 days I can track instead of a week, right? And then once I've tracked, I don't really need to be in the studio. do you? What do you need to be in the studio for once we've tracked?
So you just like mixing the box,
Totally.
mixing the cans.
Well, yeah, I've used the pre's, I've used the compressors, I've used my, beautiful 70s 87 and my beautiful 70s 414 and so on and so on. I've used all of that and, and lots of it too.
Yeah.
Like there isn't one channel that isn't going through, a preamp that's worth $4,000 or a compressor that's worth $5,000. You know what I mean? Everything is going through these very high-end preamps and compressors. So everything that we've tracked and microphones, everything that we track sounds amazing. So desk up, desk mix, faders up, and people are going, wow, that's pretty cool. When you record like that, your mix is often 60% there, right?
Awesome.
So a lot of your prowess is mixing on the way in. How much do you actually do in post?
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so we spend a lot of time EQing, making sure the preamps are getting driven really well, and compressing just enough, not too much. You don't want to over compress on the way in. So I commit to compression on the way in, right? Because it's usually a microphone into a preamp, EQ, gain that preamp so that it's, you know what I'm like. I like driving them a little bit hard. I've spoken down about
Into the brand.
It's okay when you do that in the analog world. Some things, other things not so much. Obviously a bass I'm not going to drive that hard, right? Because it'll just start farting away, or cymbals. I'm not going to drive that hard because I don't want them to be really, really harsh, right? And then into a compressor, maybe 4 or 6 or 8 sort of dB of reduction, not too much. And then record at as high a resolution as I can. So I try to record everything at 96K now, basically. That's my baseline.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I can't wait to get to 192, but 96 is fine, and I try to stay at 96 all the way through. And then in the box, mate, mixing is mixing. You do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Right? You start off with sort of shaping your sounds, sort of getting them sort of shaped, getting rid of the parts that aren't too pleasant to the ear with some EQ, and then you start the processing. First part is usually adding an EQ with a bit of flavour, with a bit of character and texture, sort of add some warmth in there, and then usually a compressor after that. Gently compressing, because I've already compressed on the way in, so gently compressing, and then a bit more shaping, and then a bit more shaping, and then send to a bus and do a little bit more compression, a little bit more shaping there, and then maybe to a parallel.
Yeah.
And a little bit more compression, or a lot of compression. I just lost my thing. Sorry. Hello, 1, 2, testing. Can you hear me in there? Yeah, so a lot of work, and then reverbs, and then all the spatial, right? And then panning, and yeah.
Let's just talk about your inspirations on how you actually got into the industry. Like, what drove you to become an audio engineer?
Well, at first I was never going to become an audio engineer. I just was a guitarist, right? I was 10 years old, and by the time I was 12, I was doing Jimi Hendrix concerts out of my bedroom. Literally, I had my Ibanez Blazer, really lovely guitar for my first electric guitar, and a PV amp that I just used to crank to 11 all the way. And then, people would hear me playing, and I'm like, yeah, come. And so there'd be literally 4 stacked, friends peering in my windows, right? And, 4 stacked there, 4 stacked on the other side, people crowding into the bedroom, watching me doing Jimi Hendrix slides across the floor, on my knees, right? And so I was in bands. My whole life. So I usually started with sort of rock bands and a couple of sort of maybe heavier bands. There was a cover band in there, and probably the first band that got a little bit of recognition was a band called Fire and Ice. Don't you love that name? Hey?
I feel like
I've never heard of this one.
What was I thinking?
I'm sorry.
What was I thinking?
Catchy name though, right?
Is it? Oh, I think back at that name, I'm like, what a dickhead. What was I thinking? But anyway, we were 14 years old, and we got signed to to record a record.
Whoa, at 14?
At 14,
Wow.
yeah. Local guy, took us on, and he's like, I just love you guys. He saw us playing at a battle of the bands that we won. at 14, right? And that's right. So we won the Battle of the Bands, prize money, and a recording session with him. And he's like, I want to record your whole album. So we recorded a whole album with him, and he did it. He just did it, and you know, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? You know, I was 14, and there's a 13-song album there. Now you hear this album, you go, what? It's just incredible, you know. I'm singing and I'm playing rhythm guitar, and my cousin's playing lead guitar, and they're just arranged and just amazing songwriting. And it's like, wow, what a snapshot. It's taken, bang, there I was. You know, you listen to that and you're just transported back to that period, and you're going, wow. So I was really lucky in that respect, just to be around it at that point where the technology was changing just enough, digital was just coming in, and then digital came in, and then people started throwing away their analog gear, right?
They're worth quite a lot these days.
Now,
Yeah.
well, that's how I picked up my preamps for $1,000 each. You know, they're worth $7,000 each now. You know what I mean? That's how we picked up the compressors, and the microphones never lost their value because the microphones are microphones, right? They're still tough to get, but we were lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. And then at the end of the 90s, everybody realized, we've made a really big mistake. We need to get our gear back because, you know, this digital domain just isn't cutting it. And as you see now, we've got these amazing recording systems, but what are we using to get into those recording systems?
Yeah.
We're still using the analog gear. And everybody's trying to, you know, there's companies like Universal Audio who are making that unison technology that's emulating a preamp. You know, your microphone goes through that and then records that. So it's almost like there's a pre in front of that, right? So I remember when I was 14 and I saw this guy mixing our album. He did it on a 16 track. That was it. Right then I got the bug. And so I went out and I got myself a 4-track, a little Yamaha 4-track, and I started doing basically, you know, 4, you know, 3 goes into 1, 2 goes into 1, right? And then you've got 2 tracks left. So a 4-track ends up turning into a 7-track, right? So I was making recordings. So I started recording at 14, basically, at home.
So you pretty much were training your ears from the age of 14 to mix?
Yep. And I've still got those recordings.
Really?
I've just been, so I've been lucky enough to keep the tapes in a cool, dry place all this time. They're just tapes, right? And I know that they've got 1 pass. So I've just been putting them on the tape machine, pressing play, and not even listening to them. And just as it's coming, I'll quickly set the gain and hit record and just let it go. And hope that the tape's not going to break halfway through. So I've been cataloguing all those songs. And there's so many songs, you know. Now I'm going back to that catalogue and going, that's a really cool song, that's a really cool song, that's a really cool song, and I'm trying to match those songs with people and artists. I can't just give them away. It's like whatever, they just need to be out there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good vision. I like
Interesting.
that. I really like that.
Yeah.
Like to see what's coming from that.
Yeah, some amazing songs. Actually, I might have one for you.
Oh no.
Oh, here
Pressure.
you go.
Pressure.
I might have one for you.
Pressure.
Well, you can do whatever you want with it, but
All right.
it's about
we
your
can try
voice,
it.
really.
All right, we can try
That
it.
lovely. Can you sing for us?
No, I can't.
Yeah,
Not
come
on,
on,
I'm a bit shy now.
Give us a chorus,
I'm
mate.
a bit shy now. I can't. I'm sorry.
You've got a great voice.
Oh, I appreciate it, Sam.
Right, perfect. Well, thank you for coming on, Sam. We
Pleasure.
really appreciate that.
Yep.
And for any musicians that want to get in contact with your studio, what's it called? Loop Studios?
Yep.
And you got a Facebook page.
There's a Facebook page.
You got a website.
There's a website coming. Look, you know, the studio is kind of organically growing, and I like it that way. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're still going after 20 years, because it has been an organic process. So, yeah, Loop Recording Studio on Facebook. Just send us a message there and we'll get in contact with you. You'll notice that I haven't posted anything in 6 years, but I do reply.
Well, there you go. Thanks for coming in, Sam.
Thank
We
you so
appreciate
much.
that.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
guys. Cheers.